I don't see why you need my help with this. What? Dating sim where all the dateable characters are fish?
If I'm gonna 100% this game, I need to romance a man properly. I'm open-minded, but hell if I know what men like.
How am I supposed to help you with that?
Well, you're gay, right? And look, the shark man has a rich dad who doesn't let him express himself, just like you.
Okay, 1, if anything, I'm bisexual. And 2, my father's a modern evil billionaire. He doesn't care who I'm with as long as I'm exploiting my partner for their excess labor. Homophobia died when Barack Obama legalized gay marriage anyway, so it doesn't matter. Go through the dialogue trees or look up the answers on GameFAQs or something.
That's cheating, and I only know one thing about women. They hate cheaters.
Did I hear someone say homophobia is dead?
Yeah, of course it's dead. Have you seen a pride parade? If Scotiabank and Amazon can say that gays can play, then it's done. Gay is the new straight, non-binary's the new gay. We did it. We won.
Homophobia is not dead. You're just rich enough to get mimosa drunk at brunch and ignore it. If anything, it's the living dead, and we are in the beginning of the apocalypse.
I think you're being a little dramatic, don't you?
Me? Dramatic? Damn these young gays. They don't know their history.
Who are you talking to?
Our frackin' fabulous Lord and Savior, RuPaul.
Oh god, another episode.
Yeah, we don't need to make this a whole thing.
It's about time I hosted an episode. You youngins think that just because we've made progress towards gender and sexual equality means that our work is done. What you don't remember is how hard we fought to get here and what our forebears endured to get us to where we are now. Queerness and criminality have been unjustly intertwined, and I'm gonna set the record straight about being gay and doing crime. Our modern understanding of gender roles, man and woman, are fundamentally different from pre-colonial societies. In indigenous groups across North America, exists a third gender role we now define in English as two-spirit. Indigenous groups vary in cultural traditions and languages, so this third gender role is defined and expressed differently across different groups. The Cree language, for example, has 6 words to define different forms of two-spirit people.
I'll remember that the next time someone says that being NB is just a trend. If this gender identity has existed for so long, why am I just hearing about it now?
Well, the Canadian government, with the help of the Catholic Church, systematically stole Indigenous children from their families and forced them to attend residential schools. Their heritage spirituality was replaced by Catholicism, and these children were forced to accept the Church's strict gender binary. This binary continues to exist because of cultural reinforcements today. Bathroom signs, work or school uniforms, and government-issued ID can all be public declarations of this binary. The idea that 2 genders are somehow the default is something that's enforced not by nature, but by, man. Anti-queer laws have been around forever, but not always in the form we understand them today. For example, sexual relationships in ancient Greece, specifically pederasty, would be explicitly taboo, illegal, and immoral in modern times. In Spartan culture, there was a practice whereby young men pursue pubescent boys and enter into short-term relationships with them, which expire when the boy becomes a man, according to David Bain in his review of Greek pederasty by Harold Patzer. There were similar relationships in Japanese warrior culture called Shudo. You might instinctively be shocked by this, and it is shocking. Human sexuality has been policed differently over time, and depending on where you live. Athens started cracking down on pederasty not because children were engaging in relationships with adults, young girls were married to older men all the time, but because of changing views on homosexuality. For a long time, the only problem Athenians had with homosexual activity was who was the passive partner in a sexual relationship. Plato changed public perception of this, arguing homosexuality was unnatural because animals didn't do the do with same-sex partners, which is plain old wrong. Look at me, a pansexual king. But Plato was wrong about a lot of things, like how poets and actors will eventually bring down society.
Well, he might be right about that. But you're right, animals are queer all the time.
Girl, tell me something I don't know. But people listened to Plato, and pederasty started becoming more taboo because of those changing views on gay relationships. Today, we understand power imbalanced relationships like pederasty and Shudo are dangerous because of how they can harm kids, and we make them illegal to protect our children. Our laws on sexuality are fickle, and often decided by people in power based on their own sexual hang-ups, not fact-based truths about how our relationships can either help or harm us. Homosexuality, as we understand it today, solidified in the age of colonialism as primarily Christian nations began imposing their views of morality across the planet. When Europeans landed in America, they found societies where women walked around naked and gay relationships were commonplace. The Spanish Inquisition saw homosexuality as an unspeakable sin against God and an insult to the monarchy. Homophobia is going strong in many former colonies, but this fervor can't solely be blamed on colonizing countries like Britain, France, Spain, and Portugal. But those seeds of anti-gay hate were planted by powerful Christian nations as they exploited their newfound colonies for everything they had, imposing their morals in the process. This sprouting homophobia grew into policy like Masquerade laws in mid-20th century America, but anti-gay laws existed even earlier. Take William Dorsey Swann, who, by many accounts, was America's first drag queen. Ye old Yas Queen slayeth. Swann held balls, and can be attributed with coining the term drag, from the phrase grand rag, to describe the parties he would host in secret in Washington, D.C. in the 1880s. Police would raid these parties, arresting those attending on charges of being of suspicious character. That's illegal? You try being this many meters tall. My default mode is suspicious. Swann was also jailed on a slightly better defined charge of keeping a disorderly house. Now, I can get behind keeping an orderly den, but back in those gay old days, the implication of the charge was that he was running a brothel. He wasn't. Our views on sexuality change over time, but how we criminalize this behavior hasn't changed much. Confusing terms like obscene, prurient, and indecent are leveraged against queer folks to justify their jailing and limitations of their freedoms. Look at the trial of Oscar Wilde, who was ultimately jailed on charges of gross indecency. When we dance around the thing we want to criminalize and don't describe it as what it really is, then it becomes easier to convince the public that it's necessary to criminalize these individuals. William Dorsey Swann and Oscar Wilde weren't just punished for their crimes. They were deemed bad people, immoral citizens. And if not stopped, this indecent and disorderly conduct would spread to the rest of society.
I know about this part, though. Queer people have been seen as having an outsized influence on the people around them for forever. In the latter half of the 20th century, the gays were just sinister agents of communism. This fear was named the Lavender Scare. Numerous laws and policies were enacted in the United States to criminalize gay behavior, including the Sex Perversion Elimination Program and the For the Treatment of Sexual Psychopaths Act in Washington, D.C. The Lavender and Red Scares hit a fever pitch with Senator Joseph McCarthy's speech in West Virginia on February 9, 1950, where he claimed to have a list of State Department employees who had ties to the Communist Party. Then, a week later, in a second speech to the Senate, McCarthy directly connected homosexuality and queerness to communism. The argument was that all communists were mentally ill, and gay people were also mentally ill. So therefore, gay people could be influenced by communism more easily than straight people, which is Simone Biles level mental gymnastics even at the time.
But Herb, aren't you a mentally ill gay communist?
I'm currently in therapy, and I identify more as a socialist. The State Department almost immediately started firing known gay employees, and 91 men had been fired within 1 week of McCarthy's speeches. Things only got worse from there. From the end of the 40s to the 60s, thousands of federal workers were forced to leave their jobs or be fired simply for being gay. Luckily, by 1975, the Civil Service Commission ruled gay people could not be barred or fired from federal employment, and the Lavender Scare was over. Now, of course, we're all Canadian here, and Canadians have a nasty habit of thinking we're better than Americans. Our cousins south of the border might think of the RCMP as those guys with horses and funny hats, but they were the front line of our militarized police response to gay federal employees. Much of the rhetoric in Canada was similar to the US, but Canada insisted blackmail was the primary way the Soviet Union would coerce queer folks to betray their country. The Globe and Mail wrote in 1950, it's not that gay people are likely to be more traitorous than others, but that they are vulnerable to blackmail and might betray official secrets to preserve private ones. And so, since Canada would fire you for being gay, you were a target for blackmail. So, the solution was to fire people for being gay. Canada's a clown show too, don't forget it. That said, the Trudeau government gave out $85 million in 2017 as reparations for those who were purged from the government in that time, which the United States is yet to do. There's the proof! Canada paid out reparations, the world is better now. The Cold War is over, and it's not like you'll be fired for being gay nowadays.
You said it yourself. Canada is a clown show. Canada cracked down on queer folks just as hard as the States did. In 1981, 200 police officers bashed in the doors of 4 downtown bathhouses in what was called Operation Soap, arresting a total of 306 people. These raids were planned in the wake of anti-gay media coverage painting gay men as predators and sexual deviants following the 1977 assault of a young boy. The fear grew until police would routinely monitor bathrooms in order to catch gay men in the act, even going so far as to hide in the air vents so they could watch down into the stalls. Turns out cops are the real deviants, folks. The raid was particularly brutal, and police participating in the attack voiced their hateful opinions on the queer community. The day after the raid, a protest of 3,000 people marched on Dundas Street to the police station where the men arrested in the raid were being held. The protesters arrived to find a line of 200 police officers, and after clashes running into the night, 11 people were arrested, 1 police officer was injured, a cop car was damaged, and a streetcar's windows were smashed. In the aftermath, tensions were high, and the body politic columnist Ken Popert wrote, "I know that something got into people because it got into me. What got into me was my own anger over the unrelenting stream of taunts and insults from the media, coolly calculated to undermine my self-respect with every passing day. As long as society continues to demand us as victims and its human sacrifices, that anger is going to be there, waiting to get into us, again and again."
If my timeline's right, all of this was going down in the midst of the AIDS crisis.
You're right. AIDS was first discovered in 1981, but at the time it was called GRID, or Gay-Related Immune Deficiency, or the 4-H disease, which stood for heroin users, homosexuals, hemophiliacs, and Haitians, which is not only homophobic, but also racist.
AIDS was a big deal, though. Governments were probably scrambling to get this health crisis under control, right? Right?
Wrong. Ronald Reagan took 4 years in office to even mention HIV in 1985. Reagan, and many other religious evangelists, believed that it was a punishment from God. In fact, when a reporter asked the White House for information on the epidemic, the entire room burst into laughter. Three years into the crisis, there was no public information available about what the disease was, how it was contracted, and how to avoid it.
That sort of negligent government response is the real crime.
This is why you need to know your history, Herb. So many young queer folks were lost in the first decade of the AIDS crisis, and much of our cultural wisdom was lost with them. Since AIDS emergence, roughly 40 million people died from HIV-related causes. 1.3 million people were newly infected with HIV in 2022, despite the development of the preventative treatment known as PrEP. Globally, 600,000 people in mostly marginalized and underserved communities will still die from this preventable disease every single year.
I wasn't even alive back then to help advocate for those people's rights. I feel hopeless knowing my identity makes me a potential target for spying or vaguely defined criminality. What can we even do about it?
The first and easiest step is to look out for your neighbors and support people of all genders and sexualities. We can mourn the people we've lost and acknowledge elders' efforts to decriminalize our queer existence. No, we can't undo the harm that's been done, but we can remember the past to inform how we shape our future. People fought hard for your rights, and you owe it to those before you to keep up that work. Pay attention to municipal, provincial, and federal laws, amendments, and repeals. Contact your political representatives and demand they take action against any harmful legislation targeting marginalized members of your community. Assuming your country has speech protections, you can always organize or participate in legal protests to have your voice heard when no one else will listen. Remember, governments work for you, and if they're doing things that actively harm you and your community, it's your fundamental right to go to their place of work and let them hear you roar.
I do like telling people they suck.
Yeah, I know you do. You tell it to me quite often, actually, so.
Whoa, you're still here?
Yes, I told you I have to 100% this game. It's not gonna beat itself.
Well, I guess I can help you now. Dunk just finished teaching me all about the history of queer criminality, so I guess I can help you flirt with men now.
Forget about it. I ended up doing it myself. Turns out men just want to make up hypothetical fights and argue about who would win. See?
100 trout.
Tiger shark.
Are you kidding me right now?
There's no way you're right. Canada has a wild history of homosexual hatred. I didn't even get to the fruit machine. Likes, comments, and sharing with friends goes so far for small channels like ours. This video really means a lot to me. And it's because of our patrons that these videos are possible. Any tier on our Patreon means that you can get your name right here and get different behind the scenes videos on how different parts of our show are made. I appreciate you sticking around till the end. Love you, girl.